Island has become a cultural juggernaut because it is truly the biggest, the epitome of blank slate reality TV. The type of show that ends up being as much about the people doing the watching as the people being watched. And I don't even know how intentional this is on the part of production, but one of the things that I think makes it so resonant and popular among Gen Z in particular is how perfectly it captures the modern dating experience. Because all of those couples are in situationships, and all of us are in situationships too. When Islanders are coupled up, they are together, but also not together. Free to explore, free to break off from the other person at any time, and owing them no ultimate commitment. That's a situationship. That's part of the appeal. We recognize almost everything that happens on the show and are able to talk about it all at length. That tickles the anthropologist and the sociologist in me to no end.
They're like, that's a situationship. But it's like, why are you on such a high horse right now? Not all of us are gonna move at that speed. Yeah. I love my down, but that is a situationship.
I've heard of it before, but I don't ever get that.
I just like wish I didn't tell them, honestly. I'm telling you, it's not a situationship, and you're still saying, I think it's a situationship. It's just rude at that point.
In the most recent episode as of my filming this, Kayda and Zach have been struggling with their new relationship status. According to them, they are committed. And when Kayda told Trinity that, she said, "Oh, so you're in a situationship."
So you're in a situationship.
We saw Kayda get very sensitive about this. Kayda said, "No, I'm not. A situationship is messy. That's just hooking up." And this kind of sparked a discussion among the Islanders over what a situationship is or isn't. My favorite description of the situationship that was thrown out was Trinity's, that situationships are basically an extended talking stage. The nuance that I would introduce is that situationships are talking stages that have lasted long enough for the ambiguity to begin to corrode the connection itself. Because situationships are a decision deferred. And unfortunately, by that logic, my dear Kayda, you are absolutely in a situationship. I actually don't think I could speak to a better example. Sorry. But if it's of any comfort, I promise you, babes, most of us can relate. What Kayda and Zach have is no more or less real than what 90% of people her age are going through in the dating scene right now. There are a lot of reasons that situationships are becoming the norm. We're in a very meaningfully different place from the generations that came before us. Dating apps, more perceived options, less pressure to marry young, and longer periods of sexual self-discovery and development all come to mind. But what this season of Love Island is really making me interested in is what situationships are doing to the people that are in them. Because yeah, we really be going through it. I want to talk about Kayda and Zach. I want to talk about Aniya and KC, and Aniya and Carl, and KC and TT. And I want to talk about Melanie and Sincere. That one's serious. I don't want to talk about Kenzie because I don't have the energy. All of these relationships tell us a lot about what goes on in situationships and how ambiguity kills connection. Even when you have two people who mean each other no harm, maybe even genuinely like each other. So back to Kayda and Zach. Let's dig into what's been going on with Zach this season. I know that the common reaction to their dynamic and his behavior is that he just doesn't like Kayda as much as she likes him. I don't think it's that simple. Whenever Zach talks about Kayda, the first thing that I notice is how consistently he processes their relationship through logic and reasoning over anything else. Oftentimes he's looking for reasons that the relationship might not work or might be on unstable ground. It could be a new bombshell, or it could just be the train of thinking that he sees Kayda going down that might end their relationship. To me, that reads as anxiety overpowering emotion. Intimacy brings up a lot for people, and that can get really uncomfortable. A lot of people moderate their emotions by over-relying on logic, myself included, which is why I can tell you that all of this doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't like her at all. It could be that he's just trying to make it to the end with Kayda because he thinks that they're going to win and he can make money. It could also be that he does genuinely like her and doesn't like what that makes him feel. Whatever the case may be, what we know for sure is that this is keeping him stalled where he's at. A situationship is a decision deferred. I don't know what Kayda could do that would give him a stronger green light to proceed to the next stage of their relationship. It seems like the idea of giving her something more tangible is only going to make him more anxious. Like when he said he wanted to close off and then immediately panicked about what that would mean. Or when they were at the hideaway and right after being physically intimate, he brought up fucking another bombshell. And then Kayda is not like this at all. I don't really understand what she sees in him, but Zach makes her so giddy. Like if he were to ask her to be his girlfriend tomorrow, I think she'd be all in. But he clearly isn't ready to do this, and I think she knows that. So she's kind of gaslighting herself into believing that the situationship is what she wants. Which, like, girl, be so for real. I'm not convinced that she doesn't secretly crave the relief and security that would come from the person that she really knows is her choice, choosing her back. I mean, y'all saw her face when KC and TT became official. What seems to be happening is that she's self-erasing her true feelings and vulnerabilities and desires in order to meet Zach where he's at. But those feelings don't just go away when you suppress them, and they come back up bigger than before. That's why it's making her so emotional when the other Islanders bring up that what she has with Zach is still non-committal and is still a situationship where she can't be sure what they truly are or are not. Kayda and Zach's connection is probably one of the most common dynamics that happen in situationships. Oftentimes, one person ends up wanting more or operating on a different timeline from the other person. There is a large disconnect between how these two people are feeling, and the situationship is the only container that's wide enough to hold both realities at once. The other option would just be to break up. Okay, let's pivot to Aniya and Casey's relationship. There's just so much that can be projected onto what happened with the two of them, which is part of the reason why they damn near triggered a gender war online. It's not that a situationship can never work out, but the thing about ambiguous relationships is that everybody's going to bring different expectations, standards, needs, and boundaries to them. And that can get messy fast if your communication isn't on point. Now, as far as their connection goes, that was probably one of the most ambiguous connections that happened on this season. I see one huge reason that their communication broke down entirely, and it's very much endemic to the situationship mold. That is stealth expectations. Stealth expectations are about as sneaky as they sound. They're basically expectations that we hold for how another person will treat us or behave that we don't actively express. And once you start to learn to start monitoring stealth expectations, you realize that everybody has them all the time, but especially when the relationship is ambiguous. It's kind of like a game of Battleship where you're blindly guessing where another person's needs and sensitivities lie. Whole time you've got your own that you're keeping to yourself. You can easily end up striking a nerve before you ever realized it was there. That's how situationships, almost by design, can get very messy because people tend to operate off of the expectation that another person's needs and code of ethics is going to be a match to their own. Aniya and Casey both strike me as the kind of people pleaser that Sincere thinks he is. More on that man in a bit. It's coming. The two of them ended up both kind of martyring themselves, i.e. putting the other person over them at times when it really wasn't called for, and operating with stealth expectations about how the other person would act in return. With Casey, it's clear in hindsight that he wanted a very different kind of relationship than the one that he had with Aniya. I am a physical touch girly, and I can tell you that the need for physical intimacy and affection is very real for some people. And it's a form of validation for the relationship that can be very meaningful. But I think the real issue there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we saw Casey ever directly ask Aniya for more physical affection. It seemed to me that he was operating under the stealth expectation that that was going to be something that worked itself out over time. Another thing with him that he tried to communicate but was not able to do so very effectively was that he had a very strong boundary over his right and desire to explore outside of their connection. That's like one of the major pluses of being in a situationship in the first place, and Aniya was never very receptive to this. Not once. Stealth expectations in martyrdom will very quickly turn into resentment if your needs or expectations for reciprocity are not met. Unfortunately, Casey's way of processing that resentment in his own words were what we saw, which was speaking about her when she wasn't around in a very cruel and callous way. Those feelings, and especially that craving to explore, are part of what propelled him to move so quickly in Casa, and he found a relationship that actually matched what he truly was looking for in TT. On Aniya's side, she was also really struggling with communication with Casey. She had a lot of her own self-expectations towards him that she wasn't expressing proactively. They would come up after the fact. I think what a lot of it comes down to is an expectation for him to regulate the difficult emotions that were coming up for her around him and her experience in the villa. Things like the kind of demeanor she expected him to have when he could be goofy versus when he needed to be serious. And of course, the mixed signals between when she would say, "You are free to explore, do what you want," versus how she would act when he actually would. Aniya seems to err more on the side of anxiousness. I do too, hey girly. So when it comes to dating and relationships, that tends to require a certain level of reliability and stability that you can't really fake. For one reason or another, in her relationship with KC, I don't think we ever really saw her get to the level of emotional safety that she needed to reach in order to feel at ease. I think that was part of the reason why she couldn't open up to him physically. We saw her with Carl getting that level of security very early on, and she opened up so quickly. She's readily initiating kisses and straddling this man and all these things that she wasn't really doing very much with KC over like the 3 weeks that they were together. We see that she isn't actually anti-physical affection. It just seems clear that Carl is a much stronger fit to her nervous system. But if that's the case, inquiring minds need to know, why did she still choose KC at the recoupling? I mean, for a lot of reasons, I'm sure. I think a lot of times when you feel wronged by a person, you want to give them the opportunity to do right by you because it will help to correct previous narratives. And I think it'd be very plausible that she could have thought it would be a bad look for her not to choose KC back, or to choose Carl of all people over KC. That's double consciousness, were it to do boys. But I think a big piece of the puzzle here is stealth expectation. I do think that she genuinely believed Casey was going to come back alone. This is the unfortunate thing about martyrdom that ironically ends up serving nobody in the end. You'll end up creating even more stealth expectations for that self-martyring behavior to continue. And then when you do break that pattern, the other person's going to see you as the one who stepped out of line, the one who's rocking the boat and doing them a disservice. Whole time you feel like you're just pursuing the needs and desires that you've had the whole time. It is a rough situation with no winners. Casey made an ass of himself, and Aniya almost missed out on a connection that would have been very good for her. There is so much debate, some productive and a lot of it not, about who was in the right and who was in the wrong here. Such is the plight of the ambiguous situationship, where you can justifiably have all of the expectations that are associated with a healthy and committed romantic relationship and none of those expectations at the exact same time. I'm honestly really glad that these two got the resolution that they did, because normally in situationships that don't end well, there is no further communication. I've had ex-situationships speak to me like having a final conversation was doing me a favor, doing me the service of granting me closure, because when you're in a situationship with someone, you can't reasonably expect anything from them. Because you're not supposed to owe a situationship just about anything, right? And on that note, actually, let's talk about accountability. Without further ado, I have been waiting to talk about Sincere. I am on your ass, young man. Sincere is a grade A scammer. He's a scammer. He scams. His ability to play in the face of 3 full package baddies in Melanie, Amora, and Soul, leaving them none the wiser until it was entirely too late, is both a testament to his treachery and a humbling reminder to all the baddies out there that a bad situationship can come for us all. Because lest we forget, if all of this was not being filmed live, a lot of people would be in Melanie's position and none the wiser. It's looking really bad for Melanie, but I'm grateful that we have this example on TV for all of us to learn from. Melanie and Sincere are such a visceral example. The absolute worst case scenario that can and does happen when one person chooses to use relational ambiguity to their advantage in order to escape accountability at the expense of the other person. I think of accountability as like a balance beam in relationships. It keeps people on equal ground. If one person can successfully avoid accountability, the beam tips. They gain freedom while the other person carries more emotional weight. In a healthy relationship, accountability helps to secure and protect both people. It's a much trickier topic when it comes to situationships because most situationships focus on emphasizing the fun, the effortless parts, while downplaying the difficulties and complexities that come up when you are being intimate with another person. Because not only did Sincere appear to be completely genuine in all of his interactions with all three of them, even when he'd say one thing and contradict himself not 5 minutes later, but he also seemingly saw no issue with his behavior, no cognitive dissonance, no tells that he was deceiving anybody. It genuinely seems like in his mind, every word he said was ethical and appropriate based on the terms of the situationships that he found himself in. And there's no protection for the other side because these are situationships. Technically, they have no terms. That's the whole thing. So he got to explore with everybody he found attractive, soaking up their interest and singular attention on him without reciprocating that attention or being accountable to the investments that he was allowing and often encouraging them to make. So with that being said, I know he's technically claimed to feel guilty after movie night, but I'm not convinced that, at least where he's at now in his life and his healing, that he is capable of the self-reflection that would be required to really take accountability for anything. He has been attempting to do that with Melanie, and to her he said that all of the interactions that we saw with him and Sol and Amora were him trying to be a people pleaser and tell people what they wanted to hear. She rightfully clocked that. That explanation feels way too convenient. Now, this is just my take, but I don't see Sincere as being primarily motivated just by making other people happy. What feels a bit more accurate is that he's primarily concerned with making sure that everybody around him has a positive opinion of him, even when he's acting selfishly. Everything he does seems to be in service of that. And unfortunately, I do think his main reason for committing to Melanie is that it's going to reflect well on him in the eyes of America and everybody in the villa if she chooses to forgive him and commit back. Because lest we forget, Melanie and Sol and Amora were not the only ones that he was deceiving. He was deceiving everybody. Corbin himself said he felt betrayed by what he saw at movie night. Because we saw Sincere presented reasonable and understanding explanations for his behavior to every other person in the villa. Once again, with a straight face and not an ounce of cognitive dissonance. Not even once. You can't trust a word out of this man's mouth. It's crazy. And this even had Aniya, supposedly Melanie's best friend in the villa, chanting Team Sincere, rooting for Melanie to embrace her desire to be with Sincere and to ignore her hesitations. Her other friends, Trinity and Kayda and even Bryce, advocating for her and Sincere to be together in the end. This is very intriguing to me because those exact same girls reacted very differently to KC's behavior when he hurt one of their own. They defended Aniya so passionately for being treated unjustly by KC. And they even had the smoke for Corbin too.
Boo, Corbin.
Boo! Iconic. And then here's Sincere being outed on movie night in 4K for what I can only describe as supervillain levels of deceit and manipulation, all at Melanie's expense. And the most we get is Kayda being like, at least you knew you weren't crazy, girl. I find that fascinating. Now, at this point, I wouldn't fix my face to say that any of these girls are true friends to one another. I think if anybody, Melanie has been, which is unfortunate. But I do think that they care about each other. And at the very least, I don't think that they would go out of their way to harm or want another girl to suffer. But I don't think that Sincere is necessarily setting out to hurt Melanie either. This, my friends, is called soft power, the influence that you gain through building relationships alone. Sincere did not just manipulate Melanie, he manipulated her entire social environment. He had a bank of goodwill built up with people around her, like Aniya and the partners of her close friends. And that shit came in handy exactly when he needed it to. So the fact that they could still low-key ride for Sincere and Melanie after seeing what they saw on movie night is a real testament to the fact that he was working everybody in that villa. When I tell you super villain levels. And it's also why it's so notable that Corbin and Parmita were the only ones capable of saying to Melanie's face that her relationship with Sincere was toxic. Because situationships often rely a lot more on image and performance than they do on authenticity and substance. It exploits your hope and also the parts of your brain that are meant to make sense out of ambiguity and contradiction. Everybody who's far enough away can see what's going on and not get entranced by it, but I think it's a lot harder when you are up close and personal with it. I think Melanie's situation is actually very common, except we don't like to talk about it very much because, as she put it so self-consciously, that shit's embarrassing. Compartmentalization, dissociation, and self-erasure aren't meant to be unspoken rules of engagement for any kind of relationship. But right now, they seem to be some of the most consistent rules of engagement, if any, for a situationship if you want it to last. A lot of us know this intuitively, especially if you're a lover boy, lover girl, lover they. We get really good at practicing preemptive detachment and avoidance, even if it isn't in our nature. The thing that we as a generation may not be fully ready to talk about is just how emotionally unsafe the situationship-based dating culture that we've developed is. Because it so commonly tends to come at the expense of one person, if not both, and also anybody else who's tangentially involved. Situationships can really bring out the worst in people. Self-erasure, anxiousness, resentment, narcissistic tendencies, you name it. Because we aren't meant to do deeply vulnerable and intimate relationships without a certain level of safety to back it up. We see a lot of casualties in the villa, and it just keeps going because that is what situationships do. A lot of the time, at least. I'm not going to sit here and say that a situationship can't be helpful or mutually beneficial, because as much as it is a symptom, it's also an adaptation to where we're at socially and as a culture. And it's not like there isn't some healthy relating happening in the villa. There's a reason Trinity and Bryce are the natural favorites to win the whole thing. What they have that nobody else seems to isn't chemistry or compatibility or even commitment. It's certainty. Certainty that's been earned but not deferred. They took the time to get to know one another with intention so they could focus on building something that would be more fulfilling and feel safer and less threatened than a situationship. There's a sense of inevitability that they have because they've taken ambiguity out of their relationship entirely. It's not so good for the plot and the drama, and it may speak to why the idea of commitment feels boring for some people. Like, love it or hate it, Kenzie has been very good for the plot, and she's had herself a ball this season. But she's also suffered a lot. Oh my gosh, there, I brought her up, yay. When you watch the Trinity trajectory, there is a very real lesson there, if you're looking for it, about the kind of relationship that's worth aspiring to and the role that a situationship can play in getting there. Because maybe we don't need the situationship to disappear entirely. Maybe we just need to remember that it tends to work better as a bridge rather than a destination. Thanks for watching. Sincerely, Siah.